I think Bob is one of the bravest people I know for coming up and telling his story. So let me get started. Certainly, Bob and I knew each other like 10 years ago. He came to one of my classes, so that's when I first met him. And we didn't talk again until a little less than a year and a half ago. So and you wrote me an email. So let's start right there. So why did you write me an email? What happened leading up to that?
Well, a lot of things had happened. Personally, I've been working very hard at trying to change my image, whatever you want to call it, and also my mode of operation. And I really needed to improve my human skills, my just general demeanor of how I work with people. You know, I grew up in a GE that was a very tough, very difficult environment to succeed in, and one worked hard at trying to be tough, right? I mean, if you weren't tough, you didn't survive very well in the early years. And over the years, you know, that image had sort of like perpetuated itself. But I'd previously started a couple of years earlier trying to change the way that I talked to people, the way that I behaved in reviews, and my general demeanor. And I had a very disturbing meeting with my manager at the time that said, well, although you may be working hard at change, you need to change some more. And I thought, well, what do I need to do? Provide me with some input. And I didn't get any from him, so I reached out to Nancy, and I'd seen obviously the cards that had been sent out with "be this, be supportive," you know, be a teacher, all of the various traits that I was trying to exhibit, and I needed help to tell me how to get across the finish line with regard to changing the way that I developed. So as I say, I contacted Nancy, and she agreed to help me. And it was a very interesting email / phone call / getting together again, because all of us need help at some point or time in our lives. And it doesn't matter how hard you sometimes try, things don't always turn out how you want them to turn out. So I needed some help. And I acknowledged I needed some help, and I turned to Nancy.
Right. And so when I got the email, and I remember getting it, and it was like late on a Monday. We probably both remember even the day. And so I think I was able to call him the very next day. And at that point, I said, you know, and I really asked him like what his motives were. And we talked for a while, and I thought his motives were quite good. It wasn't just because the manager had told him, it was because he wanted to change. And so I gave him a couple of things to do beforehand, and then I agreed I'm going to go and see you in a design reviews all day long.
You shadowed me all day.
Right.
It's like nightmare, right? Right, you get, right, it's a bit like I'm being policed, whereas I 9 times out of 10 police everybody else, right? So, or at least that's part of my job function, is obviously to maintain a technical excellence. And so Nancy came along, and really it was a wonderful gesture on her behalf, because from my perspective, I was looking for an ally, and I was looking for somebody that could help me. And having had a very good experience when we did the course together, and I knew that I needed somebody that was independent of the process that I was within in order to give me an unbiased opinion. You know, Nancy didn't have any stake. She didn't have any skin in the game with regard to whether or not I changed or didn't change, right? So I needed somebody that could help me. And so that was really helpful. And we went through the whole course of the day, and obviously, based on that input, Nancy was able to identify quite a few faults that I had. And and then provided some constructive guidance on how to fix it.
So I think even before I got there, I had you read a book, which you do credit with getting you kind of baseline before I even went to see you.
Yeah, that's very true. The book is a book called Triggers. Now, in my conversations with a few of the people here, I've actually referenced that book to them, and it was the book itself was a tremendous help to me, and I'm not really a reader of anything such as novels or whatever. And so when I had the opportunity to read this book, I read it in a day, and it really did help me because I was able to identify with what it was telling me. It was telling me, what triggers you off, right? And do you have control of your environment? And are you allowing the moment to get its better of you, and so that you basically come up with the wrong answer to the question, right? Or wrong behavior relative to the situation that you're in. Nobody wants to be the bad guy. So this really highlighted to me the importance of being in control of the situation and what triggered things off. And that was probably the most useful book I've ever read on how to deal with people and deal with situations. Because things can escalate out of control very, very, very easily if you don't apply some simple self-discipline perspectives on stuff. And that book, as I say, really, really helped me get over that hurdle.
Right. We all have, everyone in this audience, including myself, have things that trigger us. And it turns out to be usually the same thing over and over again, just maybe with different people or different circumstances. And so to understand that that thing repeats itself over and over again allows you to then say, well, if that happens, what is the desired behavior that I want? And then it doesn't measure you on, I didn't do it or I did.
Right.
And I think that's a big difference as well.
Well, and some of the other words of advice that you gave me also was an enabler to say, we're all getting situations where you feel that things get out of control. And I thought that one of the words, or series of words of advice that you gave me was, because they're out of control, you don't have to spiral along with it, right? One has an opportunity to be able to say, no, I need to stop this, and how do I stop it, and what do I do differently? And that was one of the guiding lights, so to speak, that I got from our first meeting, was Nancy said, you're the person that's in charge, take control. And that's an interesting statement because I never ever thought of it in that fashion, right? I was always thinking people were presenting to me and it was my job to just audit them and get on, and it really didn't matter how I gave the message. But what it taught me was that I really needed to take control of the situation, and one of my good assets, at least I think it's one of my good ones, I'm not necessarily sure sometimes, but one of my good assets is to be able to explain things to people and teach. And what Nancy told me, based on observed behavior, was you take ownership, you take responsibility for what you're doing, and teach these people. She said, stand up at the board and draw pictures. Show them what's the right thing to do, rather than slinking into a shell and not giving them feedback. And that was a really good, positive influence it had on me, because it made me say, I need to remain in control, and I need to be able to control my feelings. And by controlling my feelings, I then am a better person, and I can react and I can teach much easier. So what I subsequently did was, I've said, and if you noticed today, and those of you that attended the course, the couple of lectures I gave today, was I'm very comfortable teaching with a pen and a piece of paper and showing people on a blackboard or on a whiteboard or on a flip stand, teaching people what they need to know to do a better job. And that's really was a game changer for me, was to take control of that situation.
Okay. So just bringing you back a little bit to the darker place, what kind of behaviors do you think you exhibited that you wanted to replace?
I think the harshness of the comments that I would make, right? I think, you've got to find a way of delivering a message rather than ripping people off a strip, right? I mean, it's easy to be derogatory. It's harder to be constructive, right? And that was one trait that I needed desperately to improve, was how do I deliver the message in a constructive manner without it being derogatory, and making the person that you're talking to or the team that you're talking to not feeling demoralized, or for want of a better word, right? And one of the comments I got from feedback was, don't go into a rant, because all that happens is people just turn off, right? I mean, and we all can relate to that, right? If somebody starts ranting and raving at you, you go, oh my God, bang, right? I mean, that's the last thing. And then once once it's happened more than once, the message doesn't get across, right? So that wasn't necessarily a good way of doing it. So I really needed to stamp that aspect out, which I think is part of the problem that I was struggling with, was how does one deliver the message in a constructive fashion to enable the workforce to be a better workforce.
And that's really when we started substituting in teaching,
right,
as well. And when you are trying to change, if you're exhibiting a behavior, of course, that you have to eliminate, you can't just say, I'm going to eliminate, and expect everybody else to say okay, because they'll just be waiting for that one behavior. So one of the things we talked about was, there's one thing to eliminate a behavior, which of course is important, but we had to add behaviors back in so that people could notice that. And so besides doing, I think we had you introduce yourself to people, and okay, so you want to tell a few more things?
Yeah, I got introduced to myself about 5 times today when I was at the lecture, right? He's going, Bob Proctor, Bob, no, I am Bob Proctor, right? But yes, I mean, some of the things that we tried to do was what's the appropriate way that one behaves when one comes into a meeting? Because there's lots of people, and I apologize to a lot of the people here. There are a lot of people here have come up to me here and said, hi, Bob, you met me a year ago for 3 minutes, and it's really nice to see you again. And you suddenly, I think, I draw a total blank, because I don't remember the person, because I meet lots of people on a daily basis. But I've tried to make it a point of remembering people and introducing myself to them to change the immediate reaction, that it's not coming late to a meeting, be there early to greet people as they come in, to be able to talk to them, but to make the session a fun session. So, my goal is to try and make people laugh as well now, so that, life sucks if it's bad all the time, right? Nobody wants to come in and experience nothing but doom and gloom, right? So I try to display a much more open and friendly and engaging perspective, and try to make people laugh and to break down barriers, because I think that people respond better when they feel at ease rather than under stress, right? So what I try to do is, as I say, try to make it a fun environment rather than a test.
Yeah, when we think about design reviews, I've had this discussion with several of the engineering leaders. I think there are probably some that still don't agree with me, but when you think about integrity, we had talked about that. When you have an integrity concern, you welcome it. You tell me there are no retributions. And when you have this more calm environment, people will tell you. But if you're afraid in a design review, what we're afraid is that you'll hold things back. And so it's a fundamental change. And by the way, I grew up in the same world that Bob did in aerospace, where I had to be incredibly tough. People were coming at me, and that really is probably how we survived. So a lot of us in our generation do have to try to make that switch for sure. And I do notice, by the way, in aviation, the first design review I sat down in the morning, nobody introduces themselves. And by the way, hardly anyone knows each other not everyone knows each other in the room either. You just sit down as if either everyone knows each other or it's not important who is in the room. So I think that's something you can probably bring back. So there was also something that I caught on to when we were there, and that's the environment. So there were a lot of people that did want Bob to change. But there were some people who had a vested interest in him staying exactly the same way. So it's an interesting environment because if you have a bad guy in your organization, you don't have to be the bad guy. So I kind of started to see how it was organized. It would be similar to somebody, we used to have it would be like a resume, and it would be like an Edison giving it to their manager, giving it to their manager, and then giving it to me, and then I'm correcting spelling mistakes. By the time it gets up to a certain level, it should be, holistically, does this look good? Not, I should never be correcting spelling mistakes. That was definitely happening where you were, and then they really liked. Can you tell us some stories about? I really think they liked.
Yes, there was a couple of really bad. Well, looking back now, they were great examples of how I was being set up, right? And to Nancy's point, right? Once you have a reputation, everybody says, "Oh, well, he's a bad guy," and he'll sort it out for you. So that when you get to the review, and people were saying things like, "Oh, you wait till you see this, you'll blow up over this." So I said, well, and based on Nancy and I talking, Nancy said, "Look, you need to rise above this," and it was strange because what happened was people said, "Well, you didn't blow up in the review, Bob. Why not?" And I said, "That's not my job, right? My job's to audit the technical excellence, but the quality of the work is your responsibility, not mine. You're the manager, right? It's not my job to tell the person that he didn't do a good job or whatever. That should all be resolved before it even gets to me, because my job is to give you a factual response to what you're showing me." And the problem that they were doing was they were priming me to be the bad guy. And so literally and after the meeting they said, "Well, why didn't you blow up and tell that guy off?" And I said, because that's not the person I want to be anymore, right? And I'm not going to fall to the bait. And the bait was there all the time until I started saying, "Look, you need to resolve this before you come into me. It's not my job to resolve this. My job is to help you. I will help you on any problem you have technically, but my job is not to solve the problem of the person doing inappropriate or incomplete work or whatever. And it's not for me to do that. That's for them to resolve before it even gets in front of me."
Right. And have you gotten some positive feedback?
Oh, yes. Fortunately, and the world's never perfect, right? You always try to do the best thing. And I've received over a lot of time. They go, managers come up and say, "You've really changed. You've really helped, and we really see you now as a teacher that's taking more responsibility." And that's what I want my role to be as well. I want to be the teacher. I want people to come to me for solutions to problems, not to be afraid to walk in my door because they're afraid by what I may say to them. So, and I've received lots of positive encouragement from lots of people in the form of development, I've received quite a lot of that. But, you know, it's not perfect. I'm still not perfect. There's no way that I'll ever be perfect, but I'm a better person today than what I was yesterday, and hopefully by tomorrow I'll be even better still, right? I mean, and probably after I've had a few stiff drinks after today. But
So what are the things that you still continue to struggle with? What's one of the hardest things?
it's the hardest thing is not to be triggered. You know, some days, you know, you really do feel that just go away. You know, just some days you think, oh my God, not again. They're not made the same mistake again and again and again, right? Because, you know, we all try to solve the problem, and one, you would like to think that I have a controlled title holder matrix of people that can convey my message as best as I can, and so that one doesn't see repeat mistakes. But probably one of the hardest things to deal with is repeat offenders. It's a bit like a prison sentence, right? People come and it's the same mistake over and over again by different groups, but it's the same mistake, and you have to be really careful not to bite the bullet, because it goes back to this whole thing about the trigger. Because if you fall to it, everybody then says, "Nah, he's not changed. He's still the same old, right?" And so some days I have to walk around with tape around my mouth because it's tough. Some days the bait's been dangled there, and you mustn't fall to the bait. That's
right. So Gary has actually asked both of us to work together to figure out, and I'm behind, but how what's a list of kind of things to do, because Gary Mercer has also written to me about Bob and is quite impressed with some of the changes he's made. So we do have some work to do to figure out how do we perpetuate this not only through aviation, but I think Bob is a wonderful spokesperson for sure. So we'll be working on that. Just on I just want to deviate real quickly. Can you tell us just a little bit about your family? I know probably a lot of people know you through work. I think half the audience is from aviation, but maybe you can tell us a little bit about your home life.
Yeah.
It can be name, rank, and serial number as well.
No, it's okay. It's all right. I gave people, actually, the people that came to the lecture, I gave them the story of whom I am, at least a little brief account. I came to GE 32 years ago from, obviously you can gather, from England, because I do speak funny relative to everybody else. I came here with 4 suitcases, $1,000 borrowed from the bank, and the promise of a job. And today is not quite today, but next week is my 32nd anniversary of being at GE. And so, my wife and I have lived the American dream. We've been very fortunate in a lot of ways. We've worked hard, but we've been very fortunate. I have 3 boys. They're all millennials. God. 30, 28, and 26. My eldest boy works for Yum Foods, and Yum Foods owns Pizza Hut, Taco Bell, and Kentucky Fried Chicken. And he was the innovation. He's a cordon bleu chef, and he worked at Kentucky Fried Chicken. Did 3 months in South Africa just recently, running the Kentucky Fried Chicken Africa enterprise for them and developing recipes. My middle boy is at Princeton doing his PhD. I think I'm going to Princeton later on tonight. It's called Harry Potter, right? Because all the buildings, I've only ever been to Princeton once, but all the buildings look like Harry Potter land, right? It looks like Hogsworth or whatever they call it, right? So
you can teach him how to say that tonight.
Yeah, right. And he's my political scientist. Oh my God, I tell you what, he's a different world altogether, right? And my third boy works in Houston, and he works for the biggest Toyota distributor. He works for the company that distributes all of Toyota's motors in America. So he's my basically my process and control man. So all of my boys are not in engineering. In fact, my eldest boy is actually the closest to an engineer in the sense that because he deals with food and recipes, etc. Obviously, he's my closest to a chemist. So he's actually quite good at mixing up formulas. So if you want good food, you need to talk to my boy, right? He's pretty good at that. My wife, obviously, we met at university. She worked there and paid me, so I had to marry the lady that gave me the money. And we've been married. I was going to say, we've been married for 37 years. It only seems like 50. But I couldn't have done what I've done without her. I told my wife the very first day we met that I said my desire was always to come and work and live in America. And I said, if you don't want to travel, maybe there's no point in us going out. And she said, nah. She said, I'll travel with you. So.
And she was so understanding because I went, second time I was in Cincinnati, and I went in and I said, hey, would you do this on the big stage and talk to people? And he immediately called his wife while I was in the office because they had a vacation planned this week. And so they postponed their vacation.
No, we actually went a week early.
Perfect.
Aruba, Carousel, and Bonaire was lovely, trust me.
Yes, it was nice. Maybe
a lot less grilling than here.
Right, that was you'll need another vacation right after
Yeah, right.
this.
No, I need a stiff drink.
Yes. Okay, we'll just stiff drink through the veins, stat. Okay, I guess we're starting to run down on time, but all of these people, they're not all from aviation. They do experience people that are tough to a point where they may find it difficult. I think sometimes people have interactions that even make them want to quit. So this is a question I've never asked you. What if someone in the audience does run into somebody that is degrading? I know it's a tough question, but what do you suggest?
Give me a call. Because I can help you, right? Now, not everybody works at aviation, but just like Nancy helped me, everybody needs somebody they can reach out to. I'm not perfect, and I will never be perfect, but I'm always prepared to help. If you want my help, call me.
So I just want to close. I do think Bob has been incredibly brave to get up here. I think, when I think about how hard it is to give someone feedback behind closed doors, and the fact that he is talking so openly about this, I don't think I've ever met anyone that wanted to change more, that was more open to suggestions. I feel a great kinship with him. I really have enjoyed working with him quite a bit. And I'm really very proud of how far you have come and the fact that you're now going to go on to help other people. It makes me immensely proud. So that concludes this session, but a big round of applause for Bob Proctor.
Thank you.
Okay, that's called a standing ovation.